our job at Doorify to give the agents as many options as possible to do their business and do it well. It's not Doorify's job to even the playing field or do anything like that, which, I've always been vocal about. But at the same time, it is Doorify's job to help all the members. That is through lots of options and lots of choices.
Hello, everybody. It's Matt Fowler again. I'm the Executive Director of Doorify MLS, the former Triangle MLS, who recently changed their name. Remind everybody that for a little while longer. I'll probably say Triangle 4 times in this call that we're going to have today with our special guest, Eddie Speas, from the Board of Directors. Hey, Eddie.
Hey, Matt. Good to see you today.
You too. Thanks so much for joining us. Eddie and I, as you've heard me say on other of these podcasts, spend a lot of time together because the board commitment is significant. And, this is a lot of time that we spend behind the boardroom doors. We've got 14 voting board members right now, some non-voting reps. We have a stakeholder council rep on that board, but Eddie comes to us from a long service on the board. Eddie, one of our questions is, when did you originally join the
Well, that is a great question. So I have joined the Raleigh Regional Association of Realtors and Triangle MLS in May of 1993. So I have been a member for a long time, served as the president of the Raleigh Regional Association of Realtors in 2004. And I believe sometime in 2002 or 2003, I was a non-voting member of the TMLS board of directors, and then later got onto the TMLS board, went off for a little while, came back. And so I've served off and on for a long time. And it's been my privilege. I've learned a lot. Yeah, I've learned a lot.
Well, that's 30 years. I hope so. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Gosh, everything's changed since 93. That's the year I started as an appraiser. I didn't know we started the same year.
Yeah, well, and I remember, I tell folks all the time, I grew up here in the area, by the way. I grew up here in the Triangle. I went to high school here at Athens, went to Wake Forest University. I was not the world's greatest student, but I graduated. But I got my license my last semester of college and immediately went to work in real estate here in the Triangle about a week after I graduated from college. So again, it's all I've ever done. But I remember being in the office, and they had the MLS books at the time still. They were still out. And I would tell agents, the best part about looking at an MLS book was I always turned to the back first, right? You would turn to the back because that's where the most expensive house in the Triangle was, right? It was always on the back page. And there were no $1 million houses in that book. I'm telling you, none.
Wow. None?
Yes, none. No, and I remember when the first one, there was a house, I do remember when the first one came out. It was inside the Beltline over off, no, it wasn't on Fairview. I think it was on Oberlin. There was a listing of Oberlin that went over $1 million. That was a really big deal.
Man, we've talked about all the tech changes, but gosh, the market, median right now, I think in the Chapel Hill area is like 680.
Yes. Yeah. So, and that's the one thing I try to bring to TMLS sometimes is perspective change, all the different changes that we've been through, the market changes, the things that you can't ever think that will ever happen, things like COVID, up and down, and I tell people too, as interesting, Matt, is that over the last, like I said, 30 years, I had never been in a rising interest rate environment my entire career until a couple of years ago, right?
And this wasn't something that was like, it was just this baseline thing.
It just slowly went down all that time. It never spiked back up or anything. So there's just always challenges, but with that, opportunities that you just cannot predict or understand. And lots of times, too, Matt, as you see, is that you take things for granted, like the information that comes there and all those other kind of things. And so
compensation, other fields in the database that have always been there. And you can't imagine the world where they're not there.
Correct.
And then they're not.
Correct.
And I guess your point, Eddie, is that's just part of it, right? If you're in the real estate business, it's just such a dynamic space. It's heavily regulated. It's one of the largest industries in the country, certainly. Minor tweaks have enormous impacts. But at the end of the day, you mentioned COVID, people still move. People still have a life change. They still need a new house. They need us to tell them or help them find the one with wide doors for handicap access, or, that's got fiber because they both work from home on Zoom all the time. And that's why you can't just buy a house like a plane ticket. Like people thought about that back when you and I were starting in this. There was the Megatrends book back in the day that said that we would be disintermediated, right? That there wouldn't, if there was an agent somewhere, that's just going to be a computer. And I think we all just kind of accepted that as true, except it wasn't. You still need a professional to help you through a transaction as, as continually challenging as this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether you want to call it a guide or a counselor or just a helping hand, the buying and selling of real estate is complex, especially in residential. It's emotional, and getting people through that, whether it's been one house that they bought, their first house, or whether it's been 10, is that they're just, and I've never seen a perfect inspection report, and I've never seen every closing without, you can't, but to back up a little bit, that's what I love about the business, is that every day is different.
Sure.
And I learn something new every day, something changes every day. And that's a challenge for buyers and sellers who are not in it every day, right? The average buyer and seller, they read things, they see things, they check things on YouTube. They can learn a lot, but experience does matter.
Well, there's that old adage that if you think hiring a professional is expensive, hire an amateur. Right. And this is, I have a niece that's moving to town from Boston, and she literally has a PhD from MIT. Okay. So there aren't very many people smarter than her. And the very first thing I told her, she's buying a house in Cary, was, you got to hire somebody, right? Because I live here and I run the MLS, but I don't know Cary. Like, somebody needs to know Cary with the daycare and the soccer and the greenways and all the stuff, and the schools, of course. And it's just such a better experience, like hiring a local guide when you travel. If you just like drive around and look out the window, it's very different than if you have someone who grew up there. And,
correct.
And you get to be that for people. Or I guess, I skipped a question or two, Eddie. Like, you manage people in your office. What's your actual role at your company?
So I'm the Chief Development Officer for Coldwell Banker Advantage, also the qualifying BIC for the firm. Our firm we are a family of companies, and we have about 60 some offices spread across Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. My role is to work and help grow the business for the triangle and the triad of our areas. So I work with about 600 agents and 18 managers. And so every day is, the way I look at it is, I'm in the trenches. I choose to be in an office with the agents instead of being in an office somewhere away from the agents. So I have a license. I have been in their shoes. I sold for a long time. I did a lot of other things with real estate in my license, but now I work basically to help other agents grow their business, or to make their business easier, or to help them build a better business. So that's where my role is.
I know you and I talk about those people all the time. You're a zealous advocate, Eddie, for those folks, as I couldn't do what I do without that. Right. So I'm really interested. You've got your ear to the ground with these people. Like, you could avoid them, but you don't. You're out there among them. Looking at 2025 coming up, we just had a 0.5 point rate cut. We have all this automation coming into the business. We have AI. We have these productivity tools that I think are coming in from all over the place. We have all this stuff. You're on the inside. You get to see the new tech coming in. You've been to the conferences and stuff that we go to. What do you tell the practitioners in your office? All of our subscribers get to see these Meet the Board podcast, but you're a leader in a big brokerage across a few states. Is there a theme that you're sharing with your people?
Well, that's a great question. Keeping up is not easy, so it starts with knowing the agent, really truly knowing what type of business they're trying to build, right? The agent has to know what their goals are, what they want to try to achieve, and then how do they get their tools, technology, right, are built, and the most successful ones, right, that could get in place. They either make life, for me, it's got to solve some different problems, right? It's either got to save the agent money, or it has to save them time, or it has to meet the expectations or exceed the expectations of the client, right? So for example, right now, you cannot imagine having a business that doesn't have e-signatures, right? Like, every buyer and seller now probably expects to be able to sign a contract through e-signatures, right? But when you and I started our careers, the idea that you could have e-signatures was not an expectation, right? We were still using roller roller faxes with the roll paper, and I was the coolest dude in the world with a bag phone, right? But the idea that, if it don't accept technology or take on technology, if you don't understand why you need it or what you want to do with it. But
Yeah.
once you know that, then you can do the research to figure out what tools meet what you're trying to achieve, or in one of those categories.
Yeah. So I guess let me see if I can. You're meeting, your people, you're meeting them where they are. What is it exactly that we could add to this particular business person's, quiver of stuff that would actually help that person? Because not all technology is going to help everybody. I think, I use these metaphors all the time, Eddie. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but I had somebody tell me the other day that if you want a custom cabinets in your house, these are, $30,000 custom cabinets, that person that's going to build them is going to use the tool that they're comfortable with. There's a craftsman that lets them deliver the product that they're confident they can deliver. And it may be an old plane from their grandfather. But if they want to make 1,000 of them, they're going to need lasers and stuff.
Right.
So you don't know whether to give that person a plane or a laser until you understand what their business is.
Correct. Plus, how do you meet the needs of an agent who's been with Doorify for one day and a member that's been with Doorify for 40 years?
Sure.
Right. And that's always, because the one person who's been with the, Doorify for 40 years, they may like to use the plane, but maybe they want to learn to use the laser. Right.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent segue here in a 10 minutes or so we have left into choice, Eddie. So you were in the room. It sounds like I'm blaming you. You were in the room when we decided that we couldn't be all things to all people, and we shouldn't try to make the plane work for everybody, stretching that metaphor, or the laser, that we're going to just, since standards exist, we're going to convert our stuff to standards, and we're going to just do both.
Well, I think you have to back up on that, right? And here's the reason why. You're taking for granted the standards part, right? Just like, it's to some degree, we all take for granted that the MLS exists and how it got there and all that kind of stuff. But
we offer choice. It was based on standards, but we can't take standards for granted. Like we could want the choice.
Right. So RESO, exactly right. So that's where I was headed with that. Was Real Estate Standards Organization, has been working, and I know that most Doorify members don't know who RESO is, right? You and I do, right? But that is a volunteer group that came out of the CMLS, correct?
Yeah, ultimately.
To some degree, right? Which is the multiple listing services, right? I believe it's a volunteer organization.
Yep.
And they created the ability, basically, in my simple terms, is that all these different MLSs had to have engineers writing code in order to figure out how to because everybody's set of data was different.
600 different like spreadsheet formats.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And in order to become efficient, in order to be able to share data properly, right, and to do more with the data, it had to be in an organized format, right? And so we're very lucky that RESO put those standards together. And I believe that Doorify, we're one of the first, if not the first, to be fully RESO certified.
We're the most certified MLS in the country. I keep finding a way that doesn't make it sound crazy, but we're the most certified MLS in the country with all three, because we also have the coveted third one, which is a little foreshadowing into something we're releasing next year, which is the ability to write into the database, not just read from it. So we'll be able to have, if you're inside the Coldwell Banker ecosystem and you've got the house already identified inside your own system as a lead, and it's in there, the CMA program, the CRM system that you use, probably in some internal form system to get the contract signed. What this is foreshadowing is the ability for you or your listing broker to just push the, okay, it's time for the MLS now button, and it just posts inside the MLS. You never logged into Paragon Matrix or Flex MLS. You logged into the Coldwell Banker ecosystem, and there's no particular reason that my organization should require you to use a piece of software that we picked that sits there in the middle, when the standards allow you to just give me the listing. And that means, and it blows our subscribers' minds, but instead of front end of choice, there's no front end. It's just the Coldwell Banker software.
Right, is in the ecosystem of whatever firm, right? Or right.
That's right. And if you want something different, if you want the, making up numbers, if you want the $500 a month one, that comes with a virtual assistant and all the AI stuff. Maybe there is such a thing, you know?
Don't say that out loud, right?
But I mean, to go with that, there's also basic cable.
Yes. I mean, it
So
could
there's
be.
one that's
That's
less
what
than
I-
now.
Yeah. And I think that's what you're really saying is that it's our job at Dorf to give the agents as many options as possible to do their business and do it well, right?
Yeah,
And
however they think
however they think. That's exactly right. Is that it's not Dorify's job to even the playing field or do anything like that, right? Which I've always been vocal about.
Yep.
But at the same time, it is Dorify's job to help all the members, right? And that is through lots of options and lots of choices.
Yeah, and we're finding stuff all the time, like a new CMA product that's going to be on the dashboard shortly. And it may be that you have a CMA in OER, you have a CMA in your MLS of choice. There's one in HomeSpotter, there's one in however many CMAs, lots you have access to. And what we're doing is we're putting a CMA that we found in Texas that's got a couple of installations around the country called CMA Snap. And it uses our standards. It's a high quality product. We're going to put a try CMA Snap button on the dashboard. And if you want to try it, try it. It didn't cost you anything. It didn't disrupt your Paragon system or whatever. But it might be the thing that really speaks to you as an analyst, as somebody who's coming up with the price for a listing. And it might be the thing that you and your team uses to differentiate yourself with.
And this was like what you're talking about is where we're able to offer options, right? If an agent wants to have it, then they can have it, choose to pay for it. If another one doesn't want it, it's perfectly fine, right? I mean, don't want to get into too far in the weeds, but data is everywhere. It is out there, and it is not one person's. I mean, once it's out there, it's out there. And it used to be that MLS was afraid to oh well, we don't want to, like when Showing Time first came around, there was a firm that used Showing Time, right? And that firm had used Showing Time. And and as far as I know at the time, they were the only one using Showing Time, right? And then came whether or not does that firm have an edge that they wanted to keep for themselves and use it as a tool that they thought eventually it became a tool that was best used by the whole system. And it became part of what we do. And now it's one of the most liked systems. But over time, tools no longer give agents an edge. It does sometimes at the beginning, right? But there's as things progress and becomes more available to everybody.
I think what you're saying is that's a moving target, right? So there are things that would not have been appropriate that we have now in the system, and there are probably things that we wouldn't do today that we will consider in a year or two.
Exactly right. That's the role of the. I believe you and I believe that the role of the DORF is to be the best system and to provide the most opportunities to help the agents. And to do that, you do have to be a little more on the cutting edge, which is hard.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you've been on the board for a long time, Eddie. To be fair, I think we shifted gears pretty abruptly. Is that fair?
We picked up speed, that's for sure.
I clearly had an architecture in mind that came from years and years in the business that I felt needed to have it shot out in the real world, this choice model. We're not the first ones, but we're among the first. And I think so many people are moving to this. If you're watching the podcast today, it's not fully public, but it's just public enough to say that our colleagues down at Canopy announced the other day that they'd signed an agreement with Paragon. So alongside their Matrix platform, they're going to offer their subscribers the ability to choose Paragon. I wonder where that idea came from. And I don't say that, all that self-congratulatory, because this was John Mosey's idea in 2015, and Bob Bemis before him, Michael Werzer released the Spark API in 2013. My company back then released the Spring API in 2013. We all saw this coming, and it's taken dramatically longer than any of us imagined that it would. But we had this architecture in mind, and it's what we rolled out last November. And it has been very turbulent. And there are things that are still getting fixed, like the 600,000 photos we just talked about have been added to one of the platforms. No, it's October 28th. That's 11 months later. So that's been a challenge to get the data in sync.
It definitely has been a challenge. It's been a way bigger challenge than any of us ever predicted or could have predicted, I think. Fair. I think what I feel comfortable with, I don't want to speak for any other board member or for you or anyone else, but I feel more comfortable with, as I've told agents when I speak to them, is that I 100% believe that we have the right strategy, right? The strategy is sound. what we're doing is sound. It is great business practice, and we believe the best strategy. Execution by some of the vendors and how it went poorly, right? And we all learned for it, and it was painful. Man, gosh, it was painful.
I mean, it continues to be for everybody,
It continues to be painful, but the path is clear. The strategy is sound, and we feel very comfortable that it's getting better every day, and that the product in the end, and all the products that are now going to be available, will make the agents better at what they do.
Yeah, 100%. Eddie, really appreciate you spending some time with us today. This is going to go out to all our subscribers. We're having these interviews like this with all of our board members. I hope that subscribers watching this get a little better idea of what goes on in there. These meetings last for 3 or 4 hours sometimes, and we really talk through this stuff.
Those are the short ones, Matt.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's not like we don't talk in between the meetings too. I mean, we have a lot of calls and contracts and stuff that we have to go over. We have a very compressed schedule, and then the industry drops stuff on us, that we have to deal with, like August 17th, for example. But we do, and we persevere. Thank you for joining us again, and I hope you guys tune in for the next week's report. Thanks again. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.